So we'll also share the screen. Okay, so welcome everyone to today's webinar, which will be focusing on the outcome documents which were produced by the logistics and carbon offsetting work streams within the Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative. And before we start with the logistics work stream, I would like to give a small update about the numbers. As you know, last week we have officially released all the guidance documents which were produced throughout 2023 by various work streams. The initiative is growing, and we are of course very happy about this. We now have more than 600 supporters in 60 different countries. And you as a supporter or a signatory are of course very much invited to download the guidance documents and methodologies which were released last week on Monday. In terms of where we stand today, of course, part one of the initiative, which was compiling the 3 phases with the pledge, the roadmap, and the guidance documents, is finished now with the release of these guidance documents, and we're entering a new era for the Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative, which will very much focus on implementation of what has been developed. So, of course, all these guidance documents which were produced are very heavy in terms of abstractness, if you will, and this will be now developed into implementation. So we're very much looking forward to the next phase. Also because all the stakeholders will be implementing on their end what has been developed. So very interesting developments here, and we're looking forward to observing all this. Of course, on this stage, I would like to thank all of those of you who are, first of all, signatory or supporter of the initiative. And of course, all those who have been working so hard and tirelessly on the development of these documents. It's really a great appreciation on behalf of the entire initiative and on behalf of all the stakeholders within the initiative. Really thank you very much for all your hard work. More than 100 colleagues from the industry were dealing with all these documents throughout last year. A great thank you on behalf of all of us. And lastly, I will also, of course, like to mention the financial contributors. As you know, the initiative is free of charge. However, financial contribution drives this initiative forward. And we would like to thank all of those who you see here, as well as on the green level. On behalf of the initiative, also to you guys, a huge thank you. Without you, it will not be possible to be where we are today. Just before I give the floor to Elizabeth, I just would like to mention that we still have one webinar to go this week, and this will be about food and food waste and smart production and waste management, which is on the 20th of December. So you are still very welcome to register for this one if you haven't done so, and you will, as usually, receive the link one day before. So, and I think this brings me to the logistics workstream, and Elizabeth from Ayala, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alex. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Elizabeth Niehaus with Ayala, the International Exhibition Logistics Association. So the logistic workstream has been focused on identifying best practice areas to reduce the carbon emission associated with logistics at events. Next slide, Alex. So at the logistic workstream, the whole value chain was represented, organized as venue owners, logistic experts, and other service providers. And the recommendations range around reducing the emissions related to the transportation of exhibits, exhibition and events materials, stands, as well as the sourcing of materials and equipment for the exhibition and events. So that was our core focus, analyzing and working on the guidance. So by implementing sustainable logistic practices, we can significantly reduce together the carbon footprint and work towards our goal of net zero carbon events. So together is the key, and collaboration at the end, we'll see why is this so important. So in our guidance document, we identified opportunities to optimize logistics and transportation routes, reduce disposable packaging materials, and source more sustainable equipment, products, and services within our sector. By having all stakeholders collaborating, we can make meaningful progress towards a more sustainable future of events on the logistics part. Next slide, Alex. So our approach was working on a decarbonization guidance on how all stakeholders could work together. And with this main goal in mind, we structure our analysis in 4 areas, in 4 scope areas: on-site logistics, traffic management and smart cities around the venues, remote and last mile logistics, what enables really consolidation, and sustainable logistics. Next slide, Alex. So I share with you a journey, so just diving deeper to one analysis, which was the scope area 1, sustainable logistics. And what we want to share with you, a quick overview of the decarbonization guidelines, the scope area. So this area means logistics from the user end, let's say an exhibitor or an organizer, to the exhibition or venue and back. That's actually the logistic journey and the sustainable logistic journey that we need to, let's say, change. And you can see that the best practice elements were identified for this area. And starting with a change of mindset, we need to change the way we work. And this is why the whole, let's say, work was, the whole guidance was called Rethinking Events Logistics. So education is a key part moving forwards and changing mindsets, measurement, transportation modes. If I choose air, if I choose land transport, if I choose sea transport, or if I choose train, the rail transport. Then we have the importance of consolidation in shipment and how this could be done from the beginning up to the supply chain management and responsible purchasing. So as this is a motivation for you just to dive deeper and just to go back to the original report so that you can really see the different outcomes for all scope areas that we have been working on. Next slide, Alex. So of course, we can't manage what we can't measure, and measurement was a really, really important part of our discussions. So the outcomes of the measurement work stream will be embedded into the event logistics practices worldwide. So we're looking forward to 2024, where we'll be implementing really all outcomes. But what we see is that there are tools that we could also implement in this journey. And one of them is what Ayala developed together with the Association of German Engineers, which are the representative of the big manufacturers from forklifts and cranes. And we have a new on-site logistic measurement tool that is very, very easy just to include to applications, but even it's actually possible just to implement via simple Excel files. And the other tool that we wanted to share with you is also the online exhibitor area that has been used in for example, in the exhibition industry since decades, and how the online exhibitor area could really become a new role as a data resource, as a tool to optimize logistics and transportation from the beginning, but also as a driver of change in, for example, changing old behaviors and cultivating a new, let's say, a way of facing logistics in our industry. Next slide, Alex. So what we also work on was on the barriers of implementations, and we identified in total 60 barriers that we structure in 4 areas: resources, education and measurement, infrastructure and regulation, and industry collaboration. The barriers that we identified within the resources is most sustainable solutions cannot be implemented for free. For example, replacement of diesel engine vehicles with electric, hybrid, or hydrogen ones will come with a cost, and which will affect not only the logistic community, but their subcontractors as well. So in order to decrease the risk of this barrier, organizations should collaborate with suppliers to match the increased demand with increased supply. So education and management, this is a measurement, this is key, you know, in order just to really minimize the barriers. We need to educate our people, and to overcome this barrier, we see the important need to start educating our teams in a collaborate and cross-functional way. So the document that we work within the logistic work stream is a first attempt to improve industry-wide education. And organizations are also encouraged to share case studies and learnings from their sustainability initiatives so that we can really move forwards faster. So infrastructure and regulation, technology and infrastructure development needs the advance further to support the sustainability transformation. For example, available electric chargers and hydrogen fuels are still scarce at venues, and even in the more sustainable advanced regions of the world. So accordingly, organizations should make sure that the grid for recharging their vehicles is sufficient to complete the itinerary routes before initiating any investment. So collaboration from the planning perspective is also key. So additionally, regulations, for example, related to health and safety, can create barriers for specific solutions. So we need to really overcome an infrastructure and regulation related barriers using our influence to accelerate the speed of infrastructure development wherever possible, and work together with regulators to find the best solutions to create harmony between different sustainable dimensions. So in the meantime, we focus more on what we can control. So, and last but not least, the 4 areas that where we identified barriers for the implementation is in the industry collaboration. So every stakeholder involved in logistics processes should focus on continuing to collaborate on the journey to net zero. We have defined a joint vision on a roadmap as the overall event industry. And now we need to develop a systematic approach to track and share sustainability and specifically emissions-related data. So a digital platform will be very useful. So that's what we all could actually have access and share the data that we are gathering. So, but let's boost collaboration to channel this support into industry-wide action. So next slide, Alex. So last but not least, we believe that the key to success towards net zero is truly collaboration. So the key to success is what we wanted just to stress on our guidance document, and is a first step. The guidance document is the first step in the creation of this action plan, and outlines the collaborative inputs from a multitude of industry stakeholders. So now that we have identified the relevant issues, we want to define and focus the next steps to provide an action plan, including short, middle and long-term goals for decarbonizing event logistics, always ensuring that the consideration of people, of our people within our industry and outside stakeholders within this transition. So we cannot forget our people. We need to take them with us in this journey. Yes, this action plan that will be our scope of work in 2024 will include a specific guidance on education and training, best practice implementation, including the barriers that we already identified, but particularly solutions for implementation that will help us to, let's say, increase also the leadership aspect related to logistics and the journey that we have ahead towards our net zero carbon goals. So this is what we wanted to share with you, with all the work that the logistic work stream deliver in 2023. So Alex, I don't know if you would like just to start with the Q&As after. How would you like to?
It's actually it's foreseen that all those participants who might have questions for you, Elizabeth, we would like to welcome all these questions now.
Very good.
You are very welcome to use the Q&A function in this webinar setup in order to get your questions across towards Elizabeth. So very welcome to use this. And I will just stop sharing and give already the floor to Johanna because she will be presenting the outcomes of the carbon offsetting work stream.
Yeah, let's wait for a couple of minutes to just see if any other questions pop up. But otherwise, I'm gonna start sharing my screen in a minute or so.
Elizabeth, you're going to stay until the end, right?
Absolutely.
In case we will have some attendees who are asking questions to you, then you can reply afterwards.
With pleasure.
All right, but it looks like everything's. Oh, never mind. Spoke too soon. Okay, so Mohammed asks, the tool which you mentioned on the logistics by a German company, is the tool SW based? I'm sorry, I don't know what SW is. Maybe you do, Elizabeth. Or is it based on something else? Software. Thank you. Elizabeth, sorry.
You mean the VDI? VDI is the Association of German Engineers, and originally, the German industry, the manufacturers like, of all the big forklifts and cranes that we use in on-site logistics, these guys that they are actually the manufacturers of the big machinery, they started actually with a very easy tool in order just to measure what let's say, the carbon emissions that we produce in on-site logistics. And it's a very easy to use, we share it with you, Johanna. You have seen it, and actually you don't need a very fancy application. You can do it in Excel, and you can really gather all the emissions that you produce during events in a very easy way. And the idea is just to understand how the different, for example, how are the emissions how are the emissions in hydrogen, how are the emissions in electric, and also in gas, because in other regions, for example, like Brazil, they really use compressed gas. So just understanding our emissions and seeing, and then also identifying ways of reducing our carbon footprint on site. So this is particularly a measurement tool that we could also work with the measurement work streams for on-site logistics, because at the end, we need to be very, let's say, sensitive to every area that we are working at. And particularly with the on-site logistics, we will need to really gather the data from all the machinery that we are using on site as part of the deliverables. Yes.
All right. Thank you for the
Thank
context,
you.
Elizabeth. All right. Okay, for all the measurements, are you going to create an Excel, or what is the plan in 2024? So the plan for 2024 really comes down to what Alex was presenting before. So it's really going to be about the implementation of what all of the different work streams have done. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that for each and every work stream, we have already outlined every single step. So just stay tuned for next year when we start communicating about the next steps of each individual work stream. Okay, someone asked, when and where will the tool be released? Elizabeth, is it already out somewhere?
Yes, we are actually, we have already, let's say, the final version for 2023, but we're readjusting some elements, particularly with, for example, we need to include other, let's say, fuels like, for example, gas. So, and this is the information that we are gathering now. So we are ready to go for diesel and for electrics and hydrogen, but there are some, let's say, fuels like natural gas that we need to include in the measurement tool. So, but we hope that we will be ready to go by the end of the first quarter 24.
All right. In observing time, I'm just gonna get started with the offsetting workstream presentation.
Please,
and if
yeah.
any other questions pop up, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we will answer anything afterwards. Okay. All right, I hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right, so the offsetting work stream. Just a quick overview of where we fall into the 8 work streams. So we were one of the 3 transversal work streams, kind of touching on every action area in some way. And we were really supposed to create a guidance for the events industry at large to understand what is even happening with the offsetting context. I know this is always a very touchy subject, so we wanted to really provide the option for everyone to really dig deeper into this topic and understand what's happening. One thing that I want to preface before is that, of course, there is developing legislation, especially from the European Union. So all of this, please look at it in this particular time frame. As legislation evolves, of course, things might change, but this is really supposed to give you an overview for now. All right, so the very first thing I want to do is thank all of the organizations that helped us in drafting the document. The work stream was facilitated by Jimmick and Greenview, so Alex and me and colleagues. Yep, that as an overview. And once again, thank you to all of the organizations that gave feedback and provided inputs into all of the different parts of the document. All right, so let me just give you an overview very quickly of what the document covers. So we've got first a definition of offsets. Now this includes different aspects of this definition. So we're talking about the types of offsets, we're talking about the key offsetting criteria, quickly touch on the Oxford principles, and of course give you an overview of what kind of standards and programs are out there. And then we really wanted to focus on the offsetting process as well, so that everyone would understand, how do you acquire it, what kind of options do you have, and also how do you communicate about it correctly afterwards. And then we give a short overview of the carbon neutrality versus net zero aspect of things. But I will talk about this later. And then, of course, we have some FAQs. We've got a glossary so that it's easy for everyone to look into this document. And if they don't know a term, to just quickly go in there. And then we also launched a survey throughout this last year. And so we have industry practice examples throughout the document. I'm not going to present those today, but you're, of course, very welcome to look at the document. All right, so the very simple definition of offsets. Carbon offsets are credits for reducing 1 metric ton of CO2 or equivalent GHGs. These can usually be generated or are generated by projects that reduce or remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So there are different ways of doing this, and I'm going to talk about the types of offsets in the next slide. But the one thing that we really want to make sure everyone understands is that carbon offsets are not a perfect solution. They can be expensive. There's no guarantee that some of the projects they support will be successful. And of course, everyone probably knows this criticism. Some people argue that carbon offsets can be used to justify continued emissions rather than actually reducing them. So accordingly, carbon offsetting should not be your very first step in order to reach the net zero goal that you've all set yourselves, but a supplementary step after emission reduction activities. And so that's why we have this hierarchy here, where first you want to really avoid, reduce, replace, and then look at offsets. That being said, offsets are going to be an important part of the net zero journey because there are hard to abate emissions, apologies. And so this will definitely be an impactful part of your net zero journey. Just don't make it your very first step in approaching this topic. All right, so when it comes to types of offsets, we have split them into technology versus nature-based and avoidance versus removal-based. So the nature-based offsets are a type of carbon offset project that is generated by projects that protect, restore, or manage natural ecosystems. And so then these ecosystems can absorb and store carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which then helps to mitigate climate change. Technology-based offsets, on the other hand, are a type of carbon offset that is generated by projects that use technology to capture or remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So these technologies can be used to offset emissions from a variety of sources. So this can include power plants, industrial facilities, and transportation. So there are a lot of different ways to do this, and often projects will not necessarily be only in one of these categories, but it's going to be on a spectrum on either of these four project types. So then we've got the avoidance projects, and those are a type of carbon offset project that prevents GHG emissions from being released into the atmosphere. So this can be done by reducing deforestation, switching to renewable energy sources, or improving energy efficiency. And then you've got removal offsets, which are a type of carbon offset project that removes CO2 from the atmosphere. So this can be done by planting trees, by investing in carbon capture and storage technology, or restoring wetlands. So once again, you'll always have them somewhere on these four aspects of it. So like I said, we have provided an overview of the key offsetting criteria. And I'm just going to give you a very quick overview, but we've got a very comprehensive table within the document where you can read up on each of these different criteria. So the first thing you want to make sure is that the offsets that you're purchasing are verified. So verification ensures that the emission reduction or carbon removal actually takes place, because of course it's easy to say, yes, we'll do something, but you want to make sure that it actually happens. The next thing is minimized forward selling. So this really comes to the time gap between the purchase of the offset and then the successful execution of the emissions reduction or carbon removal activity. So that should be minimized because you just want to make sure that everything actually happens, and the longer that time frame kind of spans, the harder it is to really know and make sure that it happens. The next one is the accurate accounting. So, I mean, Elizabeth already pointed towards the importance of measurement and offsets. As with everything else, you want to make sure that everything really happens in the way that it is previously communicated. So you want to make sure that the climate impacts of non-CO2 climate pollutants, so this can, for example, be methane, but also a lot of other types of pollutants, those can and need to be converted to CO2 so that you can actually assess the impact of these emissions. and then also the efficiency, I guess, of the project itself. The next thing you want to look at is additionality. So this really is a bit of a complex part of the quality criteria, because additionality means that this emission reduction or carbon removal basically happens relative to a baseline that would not have taken place if the offsetting activity hadn't happened. So this is a little bit subjective, and so this one is not as clear, but we have added a link in the document for you to look at, where you can find specific questions to ask actually about all of these criteria, but specifically on this criteria, so that you can really know whether this could be additional or not. The next one is permanence. And so this is really referring to how long the GHG stays out of the atmosphere. Once again, this can either be through storage or avoidance, but you want to make sure, for example, if you invest in a foresting or reforesting project, that the forest is not deforested within the next, year or whatever. So you really want to make sure that it is stored for a longer time. Co-benefits. So this is one of the wonderful things about offsets, that they are co-beneficial. So on the one hand, you have the emission avoidance or reduction, but you can also actually create a major positive social or other environmental impact, for example, through creating ecosystems or supporting local communities through these projects. So that's always something to look out for. And the last thing that we should look at is vintage. So that's the year in which the offset was issued. And it kind of comes back to a lot of the points that I was making before, that you want to make sure that it's very easily traceable what happens with the project. And the older the project is, the harder it usually is to really trace back what has happened with the project. Yeah, but ultimately, make sure to buy from reputable sources, really make sure that everything is communicated transparently throughout the process. If you have any questions, you can always ask the different projects or your broker or retailer or whoever you purchase through, to really make sure that those offsets that you're doing what they are supposed to do and what you are paying for. Okay, so the Oxford Principles of Net Zero Aligned Offsetting. In September 2020, a multidisciplinary team of experts from the University of Oxford published these principles, and they are basically a set of guidelines that aim to ensure that carbon offsetting is used in a way that is credible and also really contributes to net zero, and not only to carbon neutrality, but it is part of a longer term plan. And so you can see the 4 principles here. The first one actually includes a few, but kind of comes back to that quality criteria and the hierarchy that we were talking about. So really focus on cutting emissions first, use the high quality offsets, and then really look at your offsetting strategy on a regular basis to see if anything has evolved in best practice. Like I said, there's the Green Claims Directive coming out, so you're going to probably have to make sure that your offsetting strategy aligns with that. Shift to carbon removal offsetting. So in the long term, you really want to move towards that. That's what is generally more accepted in connection to net zero targets. So you want to make sure that we really, get the carbon that we already have out down. Instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to continue emitting and then I'm going to avoid in another way those same emissions. Shift to long-lived storage. I mean, we were talking about this during the high quality offsets, so I'm not going to go into that much more. And then the last thing is the support of the development of net zero aligned offsetting. So you can do this, for example, by purchasing the correct offsets, but also by investing in offsets that are in line with this. And of course, focusing on all of these things that I've said before to drive the industry further in a transparent and correct way. I'm definitely not going to give you details on each of these standards, but you can find these in the document. There are more details, both on, so we've got the names of the program here. We give you information about the type of carbon market, each of these addresses, the regional scope, whether there's a registry, whether verification is required for the offsets that are included in this, and what kind of labels are used. So you can find a bit more information on where you can maybe go if you don't know where to find any offsets. Okay, so there are quite a few ways to acquire offsets. And basically these range from directly and actively getting involved in their origination to then simply purchasing the offsets with the help of brokers or retailers. The decision really lies in when you need to purchase the offsets, how many offsets you require, the price of offsets, and the amount of time and resources available to you for acquiring offsets. So depending on which end of the spectrum you go on here, if you directly and actively engage in investing for new projects, you're going to have a lot more work, but ultimately also more control. So it really comes down to what your organization is looking for. Whereas if you purchase from a broker, retailer, exchange, it's probably going to be relatively simple for you to purchase, but you're also going to have less control over the actual offset. So yeah, the guidance document outlines the pros and cons of these 6 approaches. So please go into that to then find more information on this. When it comes to the offset communication, we just want to make sure that there's, of course, as little double counting as possible. And so our recommendation is that 2 or more parties can account for the same carbon offsets in their communication. So they're allowed to say that offsets have happened, but only one entity can actually claim the retiring of the offsets. So that means you can actually, reduce your emissions based on those offsets that you have purchased. Because of course, if more organizations do that, then the emissions would just magically go down very quickly, but not actually correctly. And so, but we want to make sure that it's clear for everyone in the journey, and especially buyers and attendees of events, to know which parts have been offset and which not. And if we don't allow for dual communication about, oh, this has happened here, then it might be very confusing for attendees to actually understand where offsets have happened. So whenever you communicate, be specific about the scope and boundaries of the emissions that have been offset. Once again, it all comes down to transparency. Provide information about the type of project you've purchased, and don't overstate your role in the offset creation. So if you're more on the broker, retailer, exchange side of purchasing, maybe don't say, we instigated this. And then the last thing is to just make sure that everyone understands that purchasing carbon credits does not equal emission reduction from your boundary. So making net zero claims based only on offsets is not going to be correct. And so we really discourage that. All right. So one more thing, and on this, I'm actually not going to go into too much detail because it's going to be easier for you to dig into this deeper in the document itself. But we've created an overview where you can see what's the difference between carbon neutrality and net zero, and which parts do we really have to look out for, both in the event and both in the company, because like we mentioned in the measurement methodology, an event behaves similar to a product. So you can have a net zero or carbon neutral event, but that doesn't mean that your organization is, and the same way around, if that makes sense. So you could say you could have done everything for your scope 1 and 2 emissions and really address those, and you're on the path to net zero. But if you have an event that just doesn't address any emission reductions or anything like that, you can't necessarily claim the same thing. All right. Last slide, and here you can find not only the offsetting guidance document, but also the logistics document, and of course, all of the other documents that were published now in early December. So feel free to scan that QR code and have a look. We already shared the YouTube channel where you can find recordings of all of these webinars later. And I'm going to stop sharing. And I think I already saw that there was a question. So let's see if any other questions pop up.
Yeah, if you have any questions for Johanna or Elizabeth, please do type it in the chat. We will be very happy to answer. Otherwise, alternatively, you are, of course, very welcome to write us an email in case you forgot to have your questions asked, and we will make sure that we redirect it to the person who is the most eligible to answer.
All right, let's see. Maybe we can wait until 9:45. Sorry, American time. So your time probably 3:45. And see if any other questions come up. We'll stay in the room. But I think that's it from my side at least. I don't know, Alex, if you have anything else.
No, that's it. Just one more housekeeping in terms of the future webinars. As I mentioned, we do have a webinar on food and food waste and smart production and waste management on Wednesday. So very welcome to register to this. And I see that Lauren Jenks is having a question. What is the latest on carbon capture? Is it operating to scale?
So based on what I know, there's a lot of demand for it, and I don't think that it's operating at the scale that is probably needed to get the whole industry there. So I would just keep an eye open for any developments on this. If you can find those options, of course, because this ultimately goes into the long-term storage situations. Of course, they are generally preferable to some other offsetting kinds. So yeah, hope that answers the question. I also see that Edwin has a question. Are the voluntary markets going to evolve in compliance markets where everyone will need to start offsetting? I wish I could give you a proper answer on this, Edwin. I think that with all of the developments that are happening, specifically in the offsetting sector, this is not necessarily going to be a question that I can answer right now. We'll keep an eye open for developments in the offsetting world as well, and of course, give any updates that are needed, just like with any other of the documents we published this time around. But thank you for that question. Okay, and then there's a question specifically for Alex. Alex, can you explain what the project timelines are again for 2024?
Sure. So we will, of course, keep you guys informed about all the timelines of the project. In January, we are going to, late January, we're going to send an email with everything, but we will have, of course, another round of reporting, because as you know, reporting is at least every 2 years. So we have started the first reporting cycle this year, and we do have already quite a lot of stakeholders, signatories who have reported. Not all of them, because we have extended it until the end of January. And we are, of course, now waiting for all the stakeholders to publish their roadmaps, because a roadmap towards decarbonization is key, and we're very we're very much looking forward to receive your individual roadmaps and to read all of them. There is another question, I think, to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, for educating, which Elizabeth mentioned in one of her slides, will there be programs coming up in near future to educate?
So we at Ayala, we have constantly education and training programs. Our next education and training program will be in January, early January in Kuala Lumpur. And yes, you know, what we would like to do also together with JMIC is cross sectors education and training units, so just working the several with, you know, in the value chain with the different stakeholders, so that we can really educate our people moving forwards. So I think, you know, at Ayala, we organize several webinars and several in-person education and training units per year, but it will be good starting working together with the other work streams, educating our industry cross-functional.
And I think one
Elizabeth,
thing that
just...
we can probably add, sorry, Alex, because of course we go into the implementation phase. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're gonna start including more education webinar situations from the Net Zero Carbon events inside as well. So it's not necessarily only going to be focused on the members of Ayala.
Absolutely. And in terms of the roadmap, unfortunately, I don't even see who is asking the question because it says anonymous attendee. But yes, the roadmap is extended as well until the end of January. So absolutely.
Yeah.
And another question is for Elizabeth in the connection with your program in Kuala Lumpur, how
Yes.
to enroll in to attend.
Unfortunately, you know, the event in Kuala Lumpur is devoted to Ayala members only. It's the Operation Summit 2024. But what we would like to do is just to share our knowledge and, let's say, skills with the whole industry with cross-functional seminars and education and training units, yes.
And for the Net Zero Carbon events, education that's upcoming, of course, you'll get your information about the usual channels that Alex uses. So
yeah, but I have to say that the best way to educate and train ourselves is just to get involved and just to, I really motivate every single individual to join one of the work streams, because the best way to learn is also just to be part of the discussion. So just start joining one of the work streams, and yes, let's start planning together the next education and training units.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I don't see any further questions, so that's fine. And as I said, in case you have forgotten something or would like to get in touch on an individual basis, it's not a problem at all. Just drop us a line and we'll be happy to answer. So from our side, we would like to wish you all the best. Happy holidays. And we're very much looking forward to the implementation phase of next year. Thank you, everyone.